Story 1. My dad ends every yawn like he is Goofy going over a cliff. I did not know that was not normal for so many years. Story 2. My dad was almost 60 when I was born. My mother was 28 and intellectually developmentally delayed, but high-functioning, with an IQ probably in the high 60s. My father never attended school. He was born in 1908, and my mother finished 8th grade. They must have washed the forks in cold water without soap. Our forks always had black, hard residue between the tines, about 3/4 of the way up. I thought that was what normal forks looked like. I remember the first time I saw a regular fork and was amazed at how it had spaces all the way down between the tines. Story 3. My mom used to make me call her by her first name in public because she did not want people to know she had children. I thought all mothers did this until I was about 12 and mentioned it to a friend. The look of horror on her face made me realize this was not exactly standard parenting. Story 4. My mom is really into birds, and my dad likes nature. Growing up, if anyone in the family spotted an uncommon bird or animal, they would say its name, and we would all stop what we were doing to watch it. It wasn't until I was in my late 20s that I realized this wasn't something everyone did. I happily carry on this habit, and my wife humorously joins me by watching the bird or animal and saying wow as one does. Story 5. Oh man, in my family we clung to ancient superstition way longer than normal. Like, if we couldn't find the car keys, it must have been a demon. Phone stops working? Cursed. Someone gets sick? Definitely the evil eye. It wasn't even said jokingly, it was dead serious. It got so deep that I honestly started believing it as a kid. The wildest moment though? I came home from school one day and my mom was standing in the hallway, pale and shaking, saying blood had dripped from the ceiling. It hadn't. Turned out she was dealing with intense delusions, which I only started realizing as I got older and began untangling all that stuff. Looking back, that was full-blown crazy. Story 6. My mother complains about my father to me all the time. She does not have close friends and wants her marriage to appear perfect to the extended family. So instead she shares all her frustrations with me. That has definitely damaged my perception of marriage. Story 7. I thought all married couples hated each other. I went on a field trip with 2 married teachers in high school and saw them holding hands. I was completely mystified. Story 8. Our family pet was a Burmese python. It broke its cage at one point and my parents never replaced it. It lived in our bathroom most of the time and also in their bedroom. If you left the door open, it had free reign of the house. It was 12 feet long. Story 9. There were many of us children, and my parents could not afford to take us to theme parks or other expensive places for entertainment. So we played ball or jumped rope. If we saw a nice grassy hill while driving, someone would often yell, "Pull over." We would all jump out of the car and roll down the grassy hill until we were exhausted. It was free and fun. Story 10. Everyone is talking about how abusive or neglectful their parents were, and I am here like, my unusual dad buys candy corn and mellow cream pumpkins and sets them out for guests, as if it is some great treat we all want. Story 11. My mother would drunkenly attempt to harm me semi-regularly. I felt it was probably normal, and children in books I read often had similarly odd or dramatic examples of what punishment or anger from a parent should look like. Story 12. Being asleep almost all the time. She worked the night shift, so having a different sleep schedule than the rest of us made it hard to notice how much she was sleeping. It turns out she had undiagnosed narcolepsy throughout my whole childhood. She also told me I absolutely had to wake her up for work, or she might lose her job. When I tried to wake her, she would scream at me to let her sleep and threaten punishment. Later, she would not remember screaming at me. I had a feeling that part was not normal. We are all doing much better these days. Story 13. My dad would point things out to us that he knew we would want, just so he could say no and then get mad and aggressively start screaming at us when we inevitably got upset. He would also come up with creative ways to inflict as much pain as he could without leaving marks on us. One time, when I was 7, he filled the sink with hot water, just at the temperature before skin would blister. He then demanded I wash the dishes. When I said the water was too hot, he grabbed my arm and shoved it into the water, holding it there for over a minute while I screamed in pain. Meanwhile, my mother was folding laundry, listening to me scream, not doing anything to stop my dad. He eventually let go of my arm when I screamed so loud he thought the neighbors would call the police. My arm was severely burned. It was bright red for hours. Every time I told a teacher what was happening at home, they just told me to stop talking. They did not care. Story 14. My mom was an animal hoarder, and most of my bedroom in high school was wall-to-wall rabbits. We had over 80 rabbits at one point, always poor because she would always take them to the veterinarian. I didn't see a doctor or dentist until adulthood. To this day, the smell of wet animal feces sends me spiraling a bit. I have one cat, and that's enough for me. I admitted a suicide attempt at 14 to a friend, who told the school counselor. The counselor called my dad and told him I needed professional help and a grief counselor. My grandmother had died, and we lost our home to pay for her care and funeral, so we were also homeless, but no one but me and my family knew. My dad didn't get me any help and took me out for cheeseburgers instead. Now, when I feel like I'm going to self-harm or have suicidal ideation, I crave a burger. You can laugh at this. It's funny to me. We were also homeless when I was 12 to 14 years old. For a while, a friend loaned us a cabin. It took 3 hours to get to work or school, and 3 hours to get home. Then my parents would fight until bedtime. They asked why I was failing classes. Summers were better because I spent the whole time at my friend's house. My aunt took my college money, which she had been saving since I was a baby, to pay for bills and new furniture and decor. She told me college was free, but it was not, and I didn't need the money. Story 15. My parents would answer any question we asked to the absolute best of their ability. Then they would follow that answer with their own personal research to ensure we had the right and most accurate information. They encouraged us to find answers as well. They personally challenged their own beliefs, their knowledge, and the stances of their religion to make sure we had the most scientifically accurate answers to everything we asked. I thought that was just what mothers and fathers did for their children to help them understand how the world works. It turns out I have never met someone whose parents put 1/5000th of the effort into educating their children on large questions, compared to my parents, even for simple questions like, why is the sky blue? Story 16. My mother told me I had to lie to my father. Otherwise, she would be in trouble for taking me out to eat. Sometimes, I had to pretend to be hungry when I got home. Story 17. My mom has a habit of finding dead but relatively intact animals. She puts them in a plastic bag and places them in the chest freezer with the idea of getting them taxidermied later. She has never actually taken any of them to a taxidermist, and they eventually get freezer burnt and are thrown out. Story 18. I was very aware of how unusual my family was from a young age. My mother had mental health issues, and my parents were both unusual people. One thing I did not realize was odd until later in life was how often we talked about my mother's firstborn baby who did not survive. He was alive for only a few hours, so not stillborn but very close. We would celebrate his birthday every year with white cake and vanilla frosting, and talk about how old he would be and what he might be doing at that age. We mentioned him often and imagined what his personality might have been like, essentially daydreaming about a hypothetical older sibling. My mother would retell the story of his birth and death as casually and frequently as any other story from her life. She believed in ghosts and thought I played with his ghost when I was a toddler. I always struggled to answer questions at school about whether I was the oldest sibling. I was never allowed to forget that I was not the first. Story 19. I always knew my dad drank a lot, but he was never drunk around us and always brought the money home, so I viewed it as a hobby more than anything. He drinks maybe a few drinks a week now and is doing great in life. He said when I was a kid, he used to come home from work with the hallway spinning, and it only occurred to me now that he was a functional alcoholic. Story 20. When my dad is driving down the road, he reads aloud the signs. McDonald's, Honey Baked Ham, China Garden, Jones Drive. We have no idea why he does it. Story 21. My mother was always angry, all the time, about everything and nothing. I thought it was a normal way to behave until I went to secondary school and someone asked why I was always angry. I just thought it was the normal way to express yourself. Story 22. I was separated from my mother at a very young age but ended up living with her again at the age of 7 or 8. She had married my stepfather during our estranged years and had also regained custody of my half-sister many years before. My half-sister and I were placed in separate homes as babies, and the stepfather was not her biological father either. When I returned to live with her, we had an understandably difficult relationship because we never bonded. For some reason, my stepfather doted on me. My sister, who is only 14 months older than me, he hated with a passion, and he made it very obvious. I was definitely his favorite. After a while, my mother said to him, "Every time you are horrible to my daughter, I am going to punish you." And she did. I tried to be, and I thought I was a good child. I was a damaged girl, but I just wanted to be cared for. The emotional neglect and lack of affection I suffered were very confusing because I had done nothing wrong. Of course, for many other reasons, my sister also suffered terribly. I always felt very sorry for her. It was not a pleasant time. Story 23. My dad is a bit obsessed with my appearance. I have seen him zooming into our family pictures to make sure I look thin for social media. When I gained weight, he would constantly shame me, but now that I have lost some weight, he is much nicer to me. Story 24. Raised Mormon. Some things I had to tell my friends. I can't have Dr. Pepper. It's against my religion. How about a Sprite? I can't play on Sundays. It's against my religion. I can't wear sleeveless shirts or two-piece swimsuits. That's immodest. Why were my shoulders sexualized as a kindergartner? I pay 10% of everything I earn to the church. Why does a corporation with hundreds of billions of dollars need a 12-year-old's babysitting money? They take money from starving people in Africa while hoarding enough wealth to make a Fortune 500 company blush. Have you heard of the Book of Mormon? I was indoctrinated to save my Christian friends. I was so worried about them and beat myself up for not being able to convert a single one. There are evil spirits all around us, but my dad has the power to cast them out. Story 25. My mom would take any money I received for Christmas, birthdays, or holidays and spend it on the house. I have 2 brothers. Their money was never spent on the house. Story 26. Not strange but very dangerous. It used to be common for my parents to take me with them as they went to visit friends or family, get completely intoxicated, and then drive back home at 2 or 3 in the morning. Story 27. My dad used to comment on my friends' bodies when I was a child. He would say things like, "She's so developed for 12, and then go outside to watch her in a swimsuit whenever he could. He also said, "That one is all meat and no potatoes," and "She is so ugly, she'd scare cockroaches away." As an adult, I realized he was a predator and disgusting. After he violated me as an adult, I cut him out of my life for good. To this day, I have body image issues because of him. Story 28. My dad was really controlling of my mom. She used to get berated if the tins in the cupboard were not lined up, if soups were not in a line, or if peas were not in a line. It was intolerable, but my mom used to hide it. He used to hide pieces of paper in odd places to try and ensure my mom had cleaned properly. I went into a relationship just like that, but worse. I have since broken the cycle. I am a single mom and I will never let a man do this to me again. Story 29. Being so easy to upset that just asking her to sign a permission slip was almost impossible. I had an entire ritual for getting her attention. First, she would come home and sit at her computer. I would give her about 5 to 10 minutes to decompress. Any longer and she would get too focused on whatever she was doing. I made sure to mute the television and that there were no other distractions. The dogs had to have already been fed by this point. Then I would stand about a foot away from her desk, on the edge of her vision. Most of the time she would either yell at me, meaning the ritual failed, look over and ask what was up, meaning the ritual succeeded, or rarely she would just ignore me, meaning she had a very bad day at work and I was risking a violent outburst if I spoke at all. If all of that went according to plan, this ritual had about an 80% success rate for getting her to talk to me without yelling. Story 30. My mom would take food out and leave it overnight because she preferred it to sit out for hours before heating it up. I never realized this was not ideal until I took a food and nutrition class my senior year of high school. My parents often had parties that lasted until 5 a.m., even when I had school the next day. They would hang out in the room below my bedroom, and it was always very loud. If I asked them to turn it down, they would yell at me and say it was their house. I frequently went to school with little or no sleep. My mom used me as her personal therapist for many years and would call me crying anytime she and my dad fought. When I didn't answer her once, she showed up at my job and sat in the lobby crying until I came out from the back and left work early to support her. It was one of the most embarrassing experiences ever. My parents constantly had loud sex and parties with people. If my siblings or I complained, they would call us prudes. But if I tried to have a significant other spend the night or even be in my room with me, they would kick me out. Not me, but my sister had a party or two at our house when she was 16 or 17. My mother spent the entire time with my sister and her friends drinking, smoking, and hanging out. All of my sister's friends thought our mom was very cool, but it was genuinely very odd. Story 31. My mom was perfectly capable of playing Dungeons and Dragons with us on the weekend, but chose to take that time to be by herself in the kitchen where she made baked goods for us. No one is more powerful than the dungeon master's wife. My dad also took pleasure in killing our characters. He had a kill box where he would write down the characters he killed with what and who was playing. He killed my first character with spiders. Henceforth, all my characters have arachnophobia. Story 32. Rationing toilet paper. 2 squares for urination, 5 squares for defecation. 1 ply. I would make a joke that this was abuse if it were not actually just another facet of the severe abuse I was dealing with daily. Story 33. My mom would give me gifts and then hold them over my head as leverage. To this day, she reminds me about gifts she gave me when I was a teenager and asks if I still have them, seemingly to remind me of all she has done for me. She did not know how to love properly, and I think this was her way. She also coached me to lie to the police when I had my first car accident at 16 and constantly expected me to go along with her lies when we were in public. Story 34. When I was 17 and received a speeding ticket, my mother took me to the cemetery to choose my own plot, saying I would need it if I kept driving that way. I had nightmares for weeks. Story 35. My mom used to put phenyramine in our milk to make us go to sleep. It never seemed normal until I found out at age 10. It made a lot of sense why the regular-looking milk we were given at bedtime tasted like strawberries and made me feel relaxed and sleepy. Safe to say, I never accepted a drink from her again after that. I only found out because she was discussing it with her friend while driving us to school one morning. Story 36. She made me stay overnight at her work office, often on school nights, so she could be with her boss. I slept on an uncomfortable cot and had unrestricted access to the internet at a young age. Story 37. When I was little, I caught my father picking dead skin off his feet and putting it in the houseplant beside him. I said, "Hey, I am going to tell Mom." He said that dead skin was good for plants. So I grew up thinking dead skin was, in fact, good for plants. Story 38. They told me that fart was a swear word, and then I was made fun of at school when I accused other kids of swearing when they said it. Story 39. My mom once made me try on her high school cheerleading skirt. I was about 10 years old, and it was clearly too small for me before I tried to put it on. But she made me try anyway. She was a tiny girl in high school, and I was already my adult height and reasonably proportional. It obviously was not going to fit. To this day, I cannot understand what the point of that was. Did she want me to think I was fat? Was she trying to make herself feel better about her adult size by putting me down? Was she delusional and somehow thought her tiny skirt would fit me? Story 40. I was the youngest of 4. My sister still maintains that I raised myself. I would come home from kindergarten, open a can of chili, and heat it on the stove while standing on a stool. I would be 4 or 5 years old and walk half a mile up the street to the store to buy Matchbox cars, all alone. If I stayed home from school because I was sick, my mom would basically turn on the television and head off to her bridge club. More than once, my parents forgot to pick me up from school. They would all be sitting at the dinner table and then realize I was still waiting for my ride. Once, during the high school play while delivering my lines, I watched my parents get up and leave because they were going to meet friends for dinner. And the worst part was I just thought that was normal. My wife is constantly horrified by the stories I tell about growing up. Story 41. My mother had different partners and I saw most of them naked. Nudism was pretty normal in our house and family. But when I think about my 8-year-old self looking at a naked man whom I barely knew, that feels wrong. Story 42. My parents had me mixing and pouring their alcoholic drinks when I was about 7 years old. I was also very clumsy. I'm pretty sure there was a disorder of some kind because I was really clumsy, regardless of how hard I tried, and I really tried to be careful. They had me making drinks and pouring wine into fragile, super thin glasses and would get very angry when I accidentally broke them. Then they would take any of my birthday or other money to buy new glasses, which I also inevitably broke. I think they thought I was doing it on purpose, but I wasn't. Just like the more than 10 sprained ankles and scarred knees from falling off my bike so much or falling down the stairs a few times. It is only as an adult, and since people in my house have not fallen down our stairs repeatedly, that I have started realizing how abnormal it was that I fell down the stairs a couple of times a year. Story 43. My parents had a rule that if anyone called someone a rotter, that person had to be chased around and tickled. It led to many fun times of running from tickling. Looking back now, it was two very strange things to go together. My parents are very silly people, though. Story 44. Blamed me for things that definitely were not my fault. I am 31 years old, and it drives my mom nuts when I assume she is about to blame me for something or when I preemptively take responsibility to avoid an argument. My dad still talks about how bad of a driver I am because of the one time I was rear-ended and did not call the police. Story 45. Road beverages. It was not only normal but expected that my parents made large rum and cokes in their special road cups for long car trips. Story 46. My parents raised us bilingually, and since they were our only source of English, they decided not to waste time on simple words and taught us only proper English. We were the unusual children who, when interacting with English-speaking cousins, would say, "I need to urinate," talk about domesticated members of the canine family, or casually mention the anachronisms we observed in movies. Additionally, our slang was a generation out of date. Story 47. A lot. However, most of it I knew was not normal. So, I will share one of the funnier memories. We used to live in an old house with radiator heat. It would get very dry, and the static electricity was intense. Sometimes at night, we would turn off the lights, grab metal utensils, shuffle our socks on the carpet, and shock each other. With the lights off, you could see the sparks flying. Story 48. When I was little and we would drive by a pasture. There were many because we lived in a rural area. He would wave towards the window and say, "Hi cows, buy cows." One time he said it, and I got upset and loudly said, "I wanted to say it." Story 49. Those nights when I am not allowed out of my room, the house is dark and incredibly silent, but both parents are pacing around and whispering in the dark for hours. I cannot actually sleep because the whole atmosphere of the house feels strange. I am pretty sure they were using drugs. Story 50. Mom let us play with the dry cleaning plastic covering. We would put it over our heads and pretend we were ghosts. Story 51. Oh my God. The abuse. I grew up to be such a horrible friend. To this day, I still feel like I go too far in banter sometimes. Then I overthink it. Story 52. Beating and humiliating your children. As kids, we were kicked out of the house in the middle of the night and sent to the backyard. Super weird. Yes, therapy and meditation have helped me greatly. Story 53. They drank alcohol from the moment they walked in the door at 5:30 p.m. until they went to bed. Martinis were served before dinner, and bourbon with water was served after dinner. I did not know any different. Story 54. My dad used to have me give him baths and wash his hair and back when I was probably 10 to 12 years old. He covered his private parts with a washcloth, so I never saw those, thankfully. I also used to rub his feet occasionally. He was the one who asked. I really adored him, and it is only now, in middle age with my own husband and kids, that it hits me how bizarre this was. I am working on things in therapy, and my feelings are really all over the place. It is actually tough to even write this. My dad died over 20 years ago. Story 55. Made me skip holidays. They were Jehovah's Witnesses. It was difficult, but I at least felt smug about being the only person in the room that God was going to save. Then I realized there is no God, and I never got Christmas. Story 56. 1. My mom emptied the bathroom trash can into the main trash in the kitchen every night when she took a bath around 7 p.m., and we were not allowed to put anything in the bathroom trash can after that time. If we had to throw something away, we had to take it to the kitchen trash can. 2. My mom color-coded bath towels and washcloths. All our towels and washcloths were burgundy. She assigned each of us, including herself and my dad, a color and stitched that color X on the label of one towel and one washcloth. We were to use only that towel and washcloth, and had to use them 3 to 4 days before putting them in the laundry because we did laundry twice a week. We were not allowed to get another towel from the linen closet if ours was in the laundry. If you had to take a shower, you had to wait until the laundry was done. 3. She also color-coded hangers. We used plastic hangers, and each of us, including herself and my dad, had an assigned color. Everyone had to bring down their empty hangers for laundry day. When my sister and I did laundry, she could tell who did not return their hangers by the color, and their clothes would be folded instead of hung on hangers. 4. My sister and I had a list of chores to do every day during the summer. Aside from laundry twice a week, we had to clean the house once a week and have dinner on the table when she got home from work. She was a nurse and got home around 4:30 p.m. We could not go anywhere during summer vacation or have friends over because my parents were at work. After dinner, we had to wash, dry, and put away the dishes before we could go out with friends, and by that time it was 6 p.m. Story 57. My mom used to make my sister and me wear matching outfits every day until we were about 11. At the time, it felt cute. Now it just feels like we were part of some strange twin experiment. Story 58. My family did not watch television that much. We were all big readers. We would all sit in the same room and read our own separate books quietly. Every 15 minutes or so, one of us would come across something interesting or something they did not understand and would read a paragraph out loud to the group. Otherwise, there was pure silence, broken only by the occasional turn of the page. The first time my husband came over to spend time with me at our house, he told me that was not normal. Story 59. My mother used to drive home to vacuum every single day during her lunch hour. Even if I was home and could do it, she would drive home and do it while tutoring, then drive back to work. I am wondering if it was something my father insisted upon. My father was difficult with too much weirdness. Story 60. Loved me unconditionally, encouraged me to pursue whatever brought me joy, set healthy boundaries, but did not try to punish me by grounding me. Instead, I only wanted to make them happy and proud. Now that I am older, I have realized the vast majority of people did not have this growing up. Story 61. My whole extended family had a concept called outside food, which was food to be eaten exclusively outdoors. This included pixie sticks, watermelon, ice cream cones, popsicles, and more. The real name for this food category is food that children are likely to spill. Story 62. My mom has an eating disorder. She used to have something called fend for yourself nights, where my sister and I had to make our own dinner from whatever we had in the house. It was not a huge deal, except that I now realize it was her way of hiding that she was not eating. Story 63. My parents are separated. When I didn't visit my father due to commitments, he told me, "You can't even come. I don't care because I have other children." My best friend told me this is not normal, but honestly, it never hurt me. Story 64. Mixing a healthy cereal with an unhealthy one. The healthy cereals were Corn Flakes, Cheerios, and Rice Krispies. The unhealthy cereal was anything tasty. What's funny is the healthy cereals have just as much sugar, and it ruined cereal for me forever. Story 65. My mom leaves half-finished cups of tea and coffee scattered everywhere throughout the house. Most people I know actually finish their drinks. Story 66. Mom regularly told us that if she ever starts losing her cognitive function, her final act of rational thinking would be to take her own life. She would call us to say goodbye, call the police so we would not have to worry about seeing her body, get in the tub for easier cleanup, and shoot herself. She has said this for as long as I can remember, since I was about 3 or 4 years old. Alzheimer's disease and dementia run in the family, and she thought this would be a mercy for both her and her family. I agreed with her. I mentioned it in high school and quickly learned how unusual that was. But I still considered it very kind of her until this year. Now, she is losing her cognitive function. Every time I see her name on my phone, I panic, afraid that this may be that call. I have woken up from many nightmares of having to identify her body. Therapy is helping as much as it can. Story 67. We washed our mouths out with soap or hot sauce when we were being disrespectful. I knew on some level it was strange, but it wasn't until my 7-year-old accidentally got soap in his mouth one night. Seeing how upset he was and how much he cried because it tasted so bad really hit home for me. I can't even imagine doing that to him on purpose. Story 68. I was essentially my mother's therapist from a very young age. No child should have to hear about their mother's past traumas. I found out when I was 7 that her stepfather abused her, and my grandmother knew but did nothing about it. I have trauma as a result of her trauma. I know she did not have many people to talk to, but I do not understand why she chose me, her youngest child and daughter, to share her trauma with. She had an awful life. Story 69. My estranged mother told me too much about her new dating life. She shared zodiac signs and horoscopes, blaming them on her relationships and my behavior. She also bought books about intimacy and sex but left them where I, being under 10, could see them. Story 70. That one time when my mom instructed me to chat with a foreign man whom I clearly did not know. That went on for days until I grew tired of it. Looking back, I think my mom was trying to use me to get money from that man. I am not sure, but that is the only explanation I can think of as to why she did that. I forgot my exact age, but I was still in high school back then. Story 71. My mom comes from a very talkative family. My dad said when he first went to a family dinner at her house, he was never able to say anything because everyone else just talked over each other. I thought it was normal for meals to always be filled with talking, movies to be filled with commentary, and conversations to be filled with interruptions. Dad would always just watch these interactions. Now, all of us adult cousins on my mom's side are getting diagnosed with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. My sister and I were diagnosed a few years ago. Story 72. My parents never paid for health insurance for my sisters and me. Therefore, we did not go to the doctor. If we needed a dentist, we traveled to Mexico over 10 hours just to have dental work. When we went to Mexico, my mom would bring back a variety of medications and antibiotics. If we ever got sick, my mom was the doctor, pharmacist, and nurse. They would sell her the syringes and everything. My mom was also big on home remedies, so she would take us to some lady's house, and the lady would massage our stomachs and make us drink a very unpleasant carbonated drink. Thank God we never needed any emergency care. Story 73. Getting disciplined by my mom with a metal spoon. It seemed like physical punishment of children was acceptable in the 1980s as long as it was for discipline reasons. Story 74. I knew a teenage boy from an Arabic country whose father was young enough to pass as an older brother. The father made the son pretend they were brothers. Story 75. My mom and grandparents, her parents, would go out of their way to pick up change on the sidewalk, street, or parking lot. Anything shiny caught their attention, and they would hurry over to pick it up. Once, my mom stopped the car along a busy road because there was unusually a lot of change on the side of the road, and she picked up about $5 worth. It was very embarrassing at the time, but now I find myself getting excited about finding a penny here or there. Story 76. On my 13th birthday, I had to sign a contract to remain a virgin until I was married. I also received a gold band ring to wear on my wedding finger. My 3 older sisters did the same when they turned 13. As a child, I did not realize how problematic that agreement was. As an adult with 2 daughters, one of whom is 14, I would never do this. Story 77. Dad would take us to Grateful Dead concerts starting when we were about 5 and 7. This was in the 1980s during the Jerry Garcia era. Dad would be doing the high on acid dance. My sister and I would be left on our own to figure out how to find the bathroom in a football stadium and get back to Dad without getting lost. He would also Hotbox in the car with us in the back seat, racing down the interstate. Mom did not seem to care. I hate the Grateful Dead. A lot. I went to many concerts until I was about 14 and then just said no. I have some entertaining memories, like sitting on Jerry's lap, thinking he was Santa Claus. But watching Dad do the acid dance, yeah, I will pass. Story 78. My mom grew up with a mother who took in animals, usually to nurse them back to health. Possums, skunks, cats, birds, hedgehogs, you name it. As I grew up, instead of my mom taking in animals, she would take in people. She has an amazing heart and would find people to adopt. She gave them money, found them places to stay, brought them food, and more. It was common for random people to be at our house all the time. I vividly remember jumping on the trampoline, making sandwiches, and playing computer games with virtual strangers. As kids, we accepted it as normal. Now, as an adult looking back, I realize how dangerous that was. Story 79. Making a big joke about whether Daddy would come home with the food shopping on a Saturday afternoon or whether he would take it all to the pub with him and then turn up hours later drunk or on Sunday. His friends at the pub would bang all the chilled and frozen items in the pub kitchen. Story 80. I lived in an open-concept house growing up. My parents would loudly have sex in areas like the living room, which was essentially the entire first floor. I never saw anything, but the sounds were traumatic enough. When I confronted them once, I was dismissed and told this is what adults do. Strangely, this behavior didn't start until my dad was actively having an affair and trying to leave us. I did not realize how traumatic this was or consider it a form of sexual abuse until I was in my 20s and recognized how unacceptable it was. Story 81. My mom used to forcibly bathe and shower me until I was almost an adult. I protested this a lot when I was young, and only after almost turning 17 was I allowed to bathe myself. I wanted to shower on my own, but she wouldn't allow it and would bathe me even though I always said I could manage my own body. I always hated how my mom felt the need to control and monitor my life and body. That is probably why I had some resentment toward her in the past. My relationship with her is pretty great now, regardless. She lost a son before I was born. Maybe that is why she was always too stoic. A sharp contrast to my father. I wonder if my mom's lack of respect for my boundaries is the reason I have been sexually assaulted and groped so often when I go out. I have not done anything about it besides going to therapy, but I have not told my psychologist because I do not know how either of them would react to that new information. Story 82. I'm my mother's eldest, and she had me clean the entire house every day after school starting around noon. I already had a heavy chore load before that, but I was responsible for laundry for a house of 5, dishes, cat box, bathroom, and more until everything was clean from noon on. My mother raised us primarily on food stamps and always said that anything nutritious was too expensive. I was barely allowed fruit at all while growing up. My mom would tell us to go play and then lock us out for the entire day. My mom and whoever she was dating at the time would have loud sex with us in the next room in the middle of the day regularly. I knew about sex by the time I was 7. There were huge explosive fights all night between my mom and every partner she ever had, leading to little to no sleep. Then I would walk a mile to school by myself the next morning. My mother left me in our government housing home alone at age 17 and moved with the rest of my siblings into her new boyfriend's house, where I wasn't welcome. My entire senior year was spent getting rides from people to get to school and trying not to be scared living alone. It had bars on all the windows. My mother refused to pay an extra $25 a month for my health insurance as soon as I turned 18. She also refused to fill out any college paperwork I needed when I did everything else by myself, and it was the last thing I needed to attend college after high school. She shut off my phone as soon as I turned 18. She also stole $700 from me when I was in my 20s and had just gotten into legal trouble. I called her asking for help. She said she would come if I paid her gas. When I asked how much, she said $700. I gave it to her because I was struggling and needed support. She kept calling to update where she was, but she never showed up. It turned out she kept the money and stayed home the entire time. I didn't realize until my 30s that it would never occur to me to do any of that to any child I have. She's very difficult. Story 83. My dad is a mythology enthusiast. He would always bring me here along with his friends to perform rituals with me and my family. Story 84. I spent a lot of time in children's rooms so my mother could gamble. I thought that was what you did on weekends. Turns out it is not. Story 85. They only allowed us to wear religious costumes for Halloween. My sister was Mary, someone else was Mary Magdalene, and some people were sheep. At the time, we thought it was cool and that we were devoted Catholics. Now I wonder why even go trick-or-treating then. Story 86. My mom used to cut the mold off bread and cheese and just eat the rest like it was completely fine. I thought that was what everyone did until I mentioned it to friends, and they looked horrified. Story 87. I had a parent who had a shelf in the refrigerator that was off limits. It was where all the good food was placed. Touching or eating from that shelf was punishable to the highest degree. Imagine chocolate milk, leftover Chinese food, imported candies, green apples, cheesecake. It all went onto the shelf. Story 88. There was absolutely nothing normal about my parents, and I knew from a very young age that things were messed up. Story 89. We grew up with nicknames for absolutely everything. I thought it was totally normal until my husband pointed it out. When I said everyone does that, he said, "No, they do not. You have two nicknames for oatmeal cookies. One for if they have cocoa and one for if they do not. That is weird." I now see he has a point. Story 90. Both my parents are doctors, and my sister wanted to study medicine since she was little. Many of our conversations at the dinner table were about surgeries and medicine, such as the cases my parents had seen that day. I gained a considerable amount of knowledge of medical terminology and sometimes forget that not everyone grew up hearing that, and some people might get squeamish. Hard situations, like the illness or death of a loved one or an acquaintance, have always been dealt with by overanalyzing the medical aspects. A family acquaintance recently passed away, and the group chat spent about half an hour discussing what could have caused his death. It suddenly struck me that this is a very unusual way of responding to death. Story 91. My mom had a strange obsession with my buttocks, which she referred to as the dreamy duo, but my brothers did not receive the same treatment. If I asked for permission to do something, she insisted on squeezing my butt first. I became conditioned to offer a butt grab when trying to please her. I remember feeling uncomfortable about it around 4th grade and insisting that she not grab my butt, but I think I ended up being sent to my room for resisting. I am still not sure what that was about. It never escalated further. Maybe she just thought it was funny when she was drunk, but I do not remember if alcohol was always involved. She once shared a story about a time she got hit by a car, but when I asked her how it played out, all she would say was, "I was hypnotized by a boy with a cute, but on the other side of the road." I think you can guess if I ended up as a butt or chest kind of guy. Story 92. My parents, who were divorced, both had a habit of leaving me alone in the car. They would go into a convenience store, visit a friend's house, or attend a job interview, and I was often left alone in the car. Thankfully, they always rolled the windows down. Story 93. My mom would ask almost every day, "What did you learn in school today?" If I ever said, "Nothing," she would push me. "Oh, you sat at your desk and stared at the wall for 7 hours today." I grew up thinking that learning at school was the important thing and that grades did not really matter as long as you engaged meaningfully with the material. I was a fully grown adult when I realized how many parents only ask their children about their grades and how many children do not value learning at all. Story 94. I did not know that most people were allowed to use the kitchen whenever they wanted. Aside from a glass of water, I was not allowed to consume anything that was not served at mealtime. We were latchkey children and left a note on the counter indicating what we were allowed to eat as a snack. Inventories of the kitchen contents were taken. We also had to clean our plates regardless of the amount of food, but we did not control how much food was put on our plates. Story 95. Ignore teachers and doctors urging me to get tested for a learning disability. In the 1990s, parents who let their children be diagnosed with attention deficit disorder were often looked down on as lazy parents, while those who refused were admired. That and rewinding the tape are two reasons not to miss the 1990s. Story 96. My dad would whistle to speak to us. He would go literal days whistling the syllables of words when speaking to us like, Take the garbage out, whistle, 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 whistle. There were 6 of us, and we only had a 5-seat vehicle, so when we all had to go somewhere, one of us would ride in the trunk. It was an Escort, so it wasn't closed off like a normal trunk. Story 97. As a child, my mother made me raise my arms when walking through a parking lot so that cars could see me, even though she was right beside me. Story 98. Having parents who never talked to each other and discouraged us children from talking to each other or to them. Children were to be seen and not heard. We were taught to keep a stiff British upper lip. We led separate lives, completely shut down. I knew as soon as I left home that this was not normal because I had great conversations with friends, but it left me very dysregulated for a long time. Turns out childhood. Emotional neglect is very real and can have long-term devastating consequences on mental health and attachment styles. Luckily, I realized this and got therapy. I am still working on regulation and openness in relationships. My siblings and parents, of course, just brush it aside and continue their silent ways. I have not talked to my parents in 20 years. If you are going through this, you are not alone and can always message me. Story 99. When we kids got a splinter in our foot, old house, wooden floors, we would grab a piece of bacon fat and use masking tape to hold it in place over the splinter. My dad said the fat would draw out the splinter. It usually did after an hour or two. Story 100. My parents paid little attention to where I was as long as I came back for lunch or dinner. They had no idea where we kids would go. There were no cell phones. People used landlines. No tracking. We just disappeared. We rode bikes for miles or took long walks in the woods. When I had my son, I would panic if I did not know for sure where he was at any given time. Story 101. If my parents did not like something, it did not exist or they refused to acknowledge it. My brother got hooked on drugs, and they would never admit that because it was embarrassing to them. My uncle beat my underage cousin terribly, but they just pretended she was going through a teenage phase and was troubled. My cousin ran away from home and ended up staying at my house with me and my roommates for 2 months. I took responsibility and pretended nothing happened. I knew she was safe, and I was not going to send her back to that home. Even when they found out and got angry, I brushed it off. Story 102. My dad asked me to gather all my friends for a trip to the nude beach. Later, I discovered he was a pedophile. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.